Welcome to today's 10-minute moan, and the topic of today's 10-minute moan is the SNP's drive to outlaw conversion therapy. Now, this has been received by a broad spectrum of different opinions, as you can imagine, something as sensitive as this, and I'm going to use the BBC report on it for the majority of this podcast, because I feel theirs is a wee bit more balanced. There are some who are taking the opinion, which may be correct, by the way, but I'm unsure exactly how, but that parents could face jail sentences if they try to interfere with their children's sexuality or gender choices, which is a bit frightening. But that's how some are reporting on it. The BBC one I'm going to use for the majority of this podcast, it's a wee bit more neutral on it, so I think it's probably a fairer outline. So I'll go through their report on this and that's actually happening, and then I'll give my opinions on it at the end. Okay, so their headline is, and I'll put a link to this in the comments once it goes live. Scotland seeks opinions on conversion therapy laws. A public consultation is underway on a planned law to ban conversion therapy for sexuality or gender in Scotland. The Equalities Minister, Emma Roddick, said conversion practices have absolutely no place in Scotland. The proposed ban has raised concerns from those who fear attempts to counsel people struggling with their identity could be seen as conversion therapy. Conversion therapy refers to practices aimed to change or suppress a person's sexual orientation or gender identity. The 86-page proposal document is released alongside an online consultation that closes on the 2nd of April. The Scottish Government want to lead the way on a ban after the UK Government left out the King's speech in November, 5 years after first promising to do so. This follows disagreement about what form the ban should take, whether it should include talking therapies or people questioning their gender and concerns over its impact on freedom of expression and religious freedoms. During a visit to the LGBT Health and Wellbeing in Edinburgh, Ms Roddick told BBC Scotland News the ban would apply to so-called therapy services or coercive behaviour that tried to change someone's sexuality or the gender they identified as. She also insisted that the right to family life and religious beliefs would be protected. And Ms Roddick added that an individual's actions would only qualify as conversion practice if it's done with intent and caused actual harm to a victim. The Minister said conversion practices were damaging and destructive acts that could violate people's human rights, and Scotland was leading the way in the UK to ban them. Sadly, these practices still happen today and have absolutely no place in Scotland, she said. Ms Roddick added that a parent would only be criminalised if they caused harm to a child who was coming out as gay or transgender. I'll come back to this point because that's that's why you've seen a lot of differences in how this has been reported in this, because there's a grey area here. She said the consultation responses we receive will help us to further consider those measures we take to stop the harm of conversion practices and protect those at risk, while ensuring that freedoms, including freedoms of speech, religion and belief, are safeguarded. However, concerns have been raised about the scope of the proposed laws and lack of clear definitions in the legislation. The LGB Alliance, a charity supporting lesbian, gay and bisexual rights, said they were concerned that the new laws on gender identity could outlaw any response to a child questioning their gender other than affirmation of their self-diagnosis. I'll come back to that as well, because that's quite scary, that the LGB Alliance don't think these are very good legislation to put in. Scottish trustee Rona Hotchkiss, a former women's prison governor, said, "We know the majority of unhappy children presenting as gender clinics describe themselves as same-sex attracted. The affirmation at all cost approach hurts confused young people, most of whom would grow up to be happily lesbian, gay or bisexual if left alone by the gender industry." This really got my attention, this comment by Rona Hotchkiss, and I will come back to that when I've finished the articles, not long to go. And again, I'll just read this bit out because you need to get in your head what she's saying. The affirmation at all cost approach hurts confused young people, most of whom would would grow up to be happily lesbian, gay or bisexual if left alone by the gender industry. and I like this, she added, transing away the gay is the real conversion therapy. I'll come back to this. Ms Hodgkin also questioned why the consultation document used the term LGBTQI+ throughout, because same-sex attracted people had their own needs and were disadvantaged when force teamed into campaigns by TQ+ lobbyists. Scottish Government spokesman said, no one should be coerced to change or suppress their sexual orientation or gender identity, whether this is changed from gay to straight, transgender to cisgender, or vice versa. So, what's all this about? I think the key bit to this is something that I strongly agree with Rona Hodgkins, who's the Scottish trustee for the LGB Alliance. And I think what's happening here and what she's trying to suggest is, when you've got a young kid who's confused about their sexuality, if they're a boy who's attracted to boys, that might, in their wee minds, think, well, does that mean I'm a girl? And have thoughts of transgenderism. And some people buy into this and say, oh, well, my wee boy's actually a wee girl, so they're not gay, they're actually a girl. And that's how, as she says, and I think it's a great comment, a great tagline, transing away the gay. So where people think, well, it's easier for me to accept that my child is transgender rather than homosexual, so my wee boy must be a wee girl because my wee boy wants to kiss boys. And I think that this is something that I think deserves a lot of time and discussion, because if that's what's happening in society, it maybe explains why suddenly, all of a sudden, over the last few years, we've suddenly had so many transgender kids who may not be transgender at all, they may just be homosexual. But parents in society are shoehorning them into believing that it's easier and you're transgender. And then some horrific stories. And if you look, America's generally, I don't know, 5-10 years above and in front of us in most aspects in life. And you look at some of the horrific stories going on in America, where kids are mutilated at a very, very young age, and they're given suppressive drugs that are causing them, irreparable damage to their genitalia and their bodies. And it is horrific. And if this is the case, and this Rona Hodgkins, who, to be fair, she's the LGB Alliance trustee for Scotland, I'm kind of guessing she's got a better handle on it than me. When she's coming away with stuff like this, I'm taking that as, pretty, she's come up with an opinion based on a lot of facts that maybe I'm not aware of, and I tend to agree with her. So that's point number one. Point number two is the part about parents. Now, surely you cannot pass legislation that could see parents found guilty on something that would be a criminal offence by having discussions with children and minors here about their gender or about their sexual preferences. And something that, when I read this in one of the other paper articles that I read, when it was talking about the sexual orientation of minors, surely minors shouldn't have any sexual orientation. I'm not saying they should be asexual, but what I'm saying is they shouldn't be having sex. So if they have thoughts and want to discuss these thoughts with their parents, whether it's same-sex or, normal relationships, sexual relationships, when they're 10, 12, 13 years of age, then they're not going to be having sexual relationships. They shouldn't in the eyes of the law anyway. So it's not really that big an issue. Surely, and then if someone comes and speaks to their parent and wants to talk to them about they're possibly homosexual, and the parent gives them any guidance at all, and if nobody's been able to identify what the word hurt, if you hurt them, if you hurt their feelings, if you harm them in any way, that could be mental stress. So let's paint a picture. Kid comes to mum and dad. Mum, I think I am gay. And that parent tries to suggest that they're not, or tries to discuss it with them, and that kid went on to say they were traumatised by that experience and they were hurt. These people go to jail. That's seriously where we are. If somebody turns up with their parent and says they want to wear, a boy saying they want to wear dresses because they think they're a girl and they're 7 years of age, and the parents say, no, you're not to wear a dress, we're going to the party and you're wearing denims and a shirt, is that going to break the law? It is just bizarre. Now, I do believe that there are some serious conversion therapy things go on in the world, some really scary things where, you know, people do nasty things to people who are wanting to come out as either homosexual or transsexual. I'm quite happy to accept that that's a problem, a worldwide problem that happens in some areas, but possibly not as much here. Somebody was suggesting in one of the other things that I read that certain communities who emigrate to the UK might, you know, have some severe therapy issues with what they do, possibly physically with people, and that's a whole different thing. But even if you take current law just now, and someone was to do something, one of these extreme things that has been suggested happen in the UK, then we've got current laws that can look after these things. I'm quite sure that there's reams of charges could be brought against anybody who was trying to, you know, physical or mental torture to somebody who was homosexual or genuinely transgender. So again, it's probably another example of the SNP changing laws and bringing out new laws where existing laws were fine. And I've got previous knowledge and experience with this when the SNP brought out their hastily and terrible football laws where there was not a single person charged under those laws that couldn't have been charged with the laws the way they were previously. And, you know, and then with the hate crime laws and, you know, thinking bad things, we could have saw you possibly charged in a court of law. And it's absolutely crazy. So this just seems to me about another thing that the SNP are doing that's got no benefit to anybody. The existing laws that we've got in the world, in the United Kingdom, could probably easily look after anybody who was guilty of them anyway. And it's just showboating. Absolutely showboating. And I don't know who they're pandering to, because even people in the LGBT community are telling you this is wrong. So I don't know who they think they're going to get votes off by trying to push this thing through Parliament. They have lost the plot. They have no grasp of reality. They cannot read the room. And I hope they actually continue for the next 2 years, because they'll blow themselves out the door at Westminster, and hopefully in about 18 months to 2 years' time, they blow themselves right out the door at Holyrood. Because between this, telling folk we're going to be £10,200 better off just because Humza says, and by the way, see on that, Humza told us that it'll take £20 billion of investment to get Scottish people £10,200 per year better off, but it'll not happen immediately after independence. It'll take a wee bit of time. Then somebody asked him, so when are you going to get independence? And he said he didn't know. So how do you know? If you're not working from a date, how do you know how much money it'll take to get to something? If it starts today, you do, because you know it'll take £20 billion. But if you're going to do the same project in 10 or 20 years' time, it'll not take £20 billion because there's a thing called inflation. So for you to come up with that figure of £20 billion, you must have based it on some sort of date, but you don't want to tell anybody. Because the reason you don't want to tell anybody is it's total bunkum. And this is total bunkum. You're trying to put Scottish people with different laws again with the rest of the UK on stuff that actually doesn't matter. Yes, people that get conversion therapy in weird and wonderful, horrific ways is wrong, but they can be charged under existing rules. This conversation doesn't need to take place. You are pandering again to then go, look, we're a wee bit different for the UK. Try to put a bit of tartan on. And yet again, you're using a community who you suggest you're trying to help, but you're using them for your own potential political gain, because it won't work. It's just idiotic. But you think by doing stuff like this, you'll win favour with some people. And even the LGBT community are telling you that this is bunkum. These are fruitcakes. These are genuinely potty. And I can't wait for 2 years' time when you're flung out of Westminster and Holyrood. Okay? So, if you've enjoyed the video, thumbs up, hit the subscribe, notifications if you want to see more. There's some videos around about here on the screen that I suggest you watch if you want to watch more of my rants. And most importantly of all, have a great day. Bye now.